So welcome back everyone. In this section, we're going to be digging a bit deeper into the science part of this work. And because we're teaching you a course based on neuroscience, it's important to know this. Now, we're going to be talking about our three brains and how do we go from thinking to doing to being. Let's see what Dr. Joe has to say about this. Okay, so turn to the person next to you and explain what you've learned. All right, so now you're listening to me right now with your neocortex. And what is the neocortex? Anyone? What did you learn from the neocortex? Yes, it's our thinking brain. It's the seat of our conscious awareness. So the neocortex is the newest brain in evolution. It's the biggest part of our brain that looks like a walnut. And the neocortex, as Dr. Joe says, loves to learn information. And every time you learn something new, you add a new synaptic connection in your thinking brain. You add a new stitch in your neocortex. So I would like someone to read on page 53, what is our neocortex? Yes, thank you. Okay, so now that we've learned something new, we have this philosophy or this new information in our brain. In order for us to embody it, we have to activate our second brain called our limbic brain, our emotional or chemical brain. Now, why do we call it emotional or chemical brain? Anyone knows? Yes, because every time we have a thought, we make a chemical. So anyone would like to read the limbic brain? Thank you. Okay, an important thing to note here is the autonomic nervous system. What's the autonomic nervous system? To keep it simple, it's a control system that regulates body functions, such as our respiratory rate, our heart rate, our sexual arousal, and it's divided into two parts. The first part is called the sympathetic nervous system, or the fight or flight response that we've discussed in the previous section. The second part is called the parasympathetic nervous system, or rest or digest response. Now, most of the time in the workplace, what are we activating? The sympathetic nervous system, exactly. Because we're under stress, we're always in the fight or flight response. We're anxious, we have anxiety. So that's why we're trying to teach you in this course to become aware, especially in workplace, when our sympathetic nervous system is activated. Because if we keep it activated for so long, we burn out. Okay, so now that we've learned something intellectually and we've embodied it emotionally, I would like here to give you a small example. There was a study made by Harvard Medical School where they brought a group of people that have never played the piano before, and they've measured their brain scans before and after the experience. And they sat down every day for 2 hours for 5 days. Now, after 5 days, they've been practicing with one hand. They've noticed that the brain has physically changed. They've developed new neurological networks in their brain. Everyone understand so far? Okay, because every time you learn something new, you add a new synaptic connection in your brain. Now, they brought another group of people that have never played the piano before, and for 5 days, for 2 hours a day, they've mentally rehearsed playing the piano without even laying a finger on the piano. And after they've measured their brain scans after 5 days, they've noticed that this group of people have developed the same neurological networks as the first group. Because the brain did not know the difference between what was happening outside and what's happening inside. The people who have never touched the piano, the people who have mentally rehearsed, have developed the same neurological network in their brain as the people who have physically practiced playing the piano. So it begs the question, what are you thinking about every single day? What are you emotionally teaching your body every day? It's very important to become aware of that. So now that you've learned something philosophically and you've embodied it emotionally in your body, like sports. If you're learning a new sport, if you're learning tennis, or if you're learning how to dance, if you're learning salsa, it's not enough to do it once. The more you practice it, the more you do it, it becomes natural to you. It becomes a habit. That's when we activate our third brain, called the cerebellum. So I would like someone to read the cerebellum, please. Thank you. It's the seat or set of skills, habits, or unconscious beliefs, perceptions. Yes. It's the center of our implicit or non-declarative memory. We've practiced it so many times that we don't know how we do it. It becomes natural to us, exactly. So it's just like driving. When you first began to drive, you learn the information theoretically, but until you sat down behind the seat and you started to drive, then you've activated your emotional brain, because experience enriches the brain. And because you've done it so many times, now you jump into your car and you drive, and you do that unconsciously. You're not thinking about how you're driving anymore. It becomes a habit. It becomes a natural part of you. Okay? So I would like an example of who here has an example of how they went from thinking to doing to being in their life. Yeah? Thank you. Awesome. So we understand this. Any questions? Okay. Moving on to page 55 of our workbook. I would like you to take a few minutes to read this page, and we're going to summarize it together. Okay, so when you do something differently based on something you have learned, you get your behaviors to match your intentions. You get your actions equal to your thoughts. You get your mind and body working together. You create a new experience. And when this occurs, you are biologically changing and rewriting the automatic programs. That's when you start to embody knowledge. So I would like you to get into pairs and explain with your own words the process of change in your own common language. Take a few minutes and we'll get back to it. Anyone would like to share? Thank you. Okay, so on page 56 of your workbook, we're going to talk about the Hebbian law of repetition. Anyone would like to read? Thank you. A habit is a state of being. So, there's a principle in neuroscience called Hebbian law by Canadian psychologist called Donald Hebb. And it says, nerve cells that fire together, wire together. Exactly. So if you're thinking the same thoughts, doing the same things day after day, you are firing and wiring in the same sequences, in the same patterns, and in the same combinations to produce the same level of mind. Now, that creates, if we said how we think and how we act and how we feel creates our, exactly. And our personality creates our personal reality. So if 95% of who we are by the time we're 35 years old is a set of memorized behaviors, emotional reactions, beliefs, perceptions, and attitudes that are functioning just like a computer program, then 95% of our time, what we are, we're unconscious. So how do we change them? If nature created a way that says nerve cells that fire together wire together, then nerve cells that no longer fire together no longer wire together. And just like any relationship, the more you communicate, the more bonded you become. And the less you communicate, the weaker the relationship becomes. So in order for us to change, and if 95% of who we are is unconscious, then the first step to change is to become conscious of our unconscious thoughts, is to start notice our actions and behaviors, to do something differently. Now, the moment you become conscious of your unconscious thoughts, you begin to objectify your subjective self. You begin to notice the things that are repeating in your old self. And that's what we call metacognition. When you observe yourself, then you are no longer the program, but you are now consciousness observing the program. That's what we call metacognition. So let's see the Hebbian law now in action in a small video. Okay, so turn to the person next to you and explain what you've learned. Now, on page 57 of your workbook, anyone would like to read in order for you to change? Yes, please, thank you. Exactly what you talked about. The moment you can observe your old self, you are no longer the program, but you are now the consciousness observing the program. That's what we call metacognition. It's when you start to observe yourself. Okay? Any questions? All right. Now, what are we turning on in order for us to become conscious of our old self? What are we using? What part of our brain? We are using a part of our brain called the frontal lobe. Let's see what Dr. Joe has to say about the frontal lobe. So turn to the person next to you and explain. Okay. Who would like to read about the frontal lobe? Yes, thank you. All right. So 3 things you have to note about the frontal lobe to summarize it. Number 1, it acts as a volume control. What do you mean by that? A volume control is that when the frontal lobe when you're paying attention to something and you're narrowing your focus, the frontal lobe shuts down the circuits in your brain because it doesn't want to be distracted by your environment, by time, by people around you, and it lowers the volume in your brain for you to pay attention on one specific thing. Number 2, it acts like a symphony leader. What do you mean by that? So when you ask a question, for example, of how do I become a better person? How do I become happy? The frontal lobe shuts the circuits in your brain, and based on the raw material you have in your brain, it starts like a symphony leader to call up that information in your brain, that information that's stored in your brain. That's why it's very important to learn. Knowledge is very important. Knowledge is the precursor to any experience, because the more knowledge you have, the more information it's going to start to gather in your brain. And that's how you start. When it starts to gather those information in your brain, it forms a new level of mind, and you have a vision now in your head. You have an image for you to work with. That's number 2. Number 3, it's the seat of your consciousness. So the fact that we can become conscious of our unconscious thoughts, the fact that we can become to notice our behaviors and our emotions, that's the process of metacognition. Once we become to do that, we are acting. It means we can modify our behaviors and do something differently. That's called evolution. So 3 things very important to know about the frontal lobe. Now, I would like someone to read on top of page 59. The frontal lobe is also called the CEO. Yes, thank you. So let's do a small exercise to demonstrate this. I would like you to put your pens down, close your eyes, take a deep breath in, and think, what is the greatest expression of myself that I would like to be? Now open your eyes and jot down what's the image that you've got, that you received in your brain. Okay. Any questions? All right. So now, I would like you to turn on page 60 of your workbook. You're going to notice now in time to reflect how we have linked each section to a part of our brain. Take a few moments to read it down and write down a few notes of what you've learned in this section. Okay, so moving on to the next tool that we're going to be teaching you, stop it. Now this is a tool you can use in the moment that and does not take a lot of your time. Use it when you hear yourself saying a negative, self-limiting or unproductive thought. Someone else hears you express a negative, self-limiting or unproductive thought. When you notice your frustration or anger with a particular person, situation, or circumstance, when you notice you are applying unhealthy behaviors, when you hear yourself saying, I can't. So I would like you to show you a small video before we jump into this exercise. Okay, so now that we've seen this video and how we can use this exercise, I would like you to get into pairs and person A and person B. Work with someone that you've not worked before, okay? And now use any of the questions below to practice this tool. What self-limiting thoughts do you say to yourself? What negative or unproductive things do others hear you say? What frustrates you? What makes you angry or unhappy? What are some of your unhealthy behaviors? When do you hear yourself say, I can't? Write down one of your answers and get into pairs, and let's jump into this exercise. Now, person A reads or say what you wrote down, and person B, you have to coach the other person to say, stop it. And you may have to say it a few times for that person to change their thoughts. Or you can ask any of those questions in any order. What will it take to stop it? How can you seek support to stop it? What could happen if you did stop it? What could happen if you did not stop it? And how is this thought or behavior limiting your possibilities or your life? So take a few moments and work on this exercise together. Okay. So anyone would like to share from this exercise? Okay, thank you. Yes? Awesome. All right, thank you.